Hello, it is 7 a.m. on a Sunday. I have a cup of tea and a leftover pie from Pie Day for breakfast of Champions, and we're going to make a video about a project I made 8 years ago, because I didn't come up with a Skyrim idea, so here we go. Ooh, that's good. Now, if you keep up with Avatar, not the blue people talking about an actually good franchise, then you know that the next Avatar series has been announced. Avatar 7 Heavens. And I took that personally in the mofo sense. It was at that point that I realized that I said mofo instead of FOMO, and I thought that was really funny, so I kept it in. Because I went to college about 8 years ago, and they let me graduate for some reason. But in order to do that, I had to do a senior capstone project. Now, I had options for this degree. I could have made a senior film, I could have written a senior thesis, or I could have written a series. And I wrote an Avatar series about the Avatar after Korra, which I called The Trials of Hu Shen. So in this video, I'm going to go through the character dossiers that I came up with and give you a TLDR of the story, because that sounds like fun. Quick note, all the art here was done by family friend Kyle Ploehn. How much did I pay him for his services? Case of beer. So if you want to see more of his work, I'll leave a link in the description below. So a little bit about the world since after Avatar Korra. Ever since Korra decided to leave the portals to the spirit world open, many spirits have poured out of the spirit world in order to live normal lives amongst the humans. They're running shops, they're working in factories, they're going to school, and they're traveling the world. And the humans are learning to adjust their lives with the spirits casually living amongst them. But this doesn't come without a grain of salt. Some of the people still believe that the spirits don't belong there, and they totally ignore Avatar Korra's claim the spirits and people are meant to live together in harmony. But more and more cities are beginning to develop. The more a city grows, the more likely it is to see spirits living amongst the people. Some cities welcome them with open arms, while others are more likely to show some level of resentment towards the spirits. Now let's get into the characters. This is Hu Shen. He's the avatar that I came up with. He is a young, eager, and talented lad who lives with his father and his tribe in the Siwang Desert. When I was coming with an idea for an earthbending avatar, I wanted to explore something that hasn't been really explored yet in the show. And what I came up with was sandbenders. We don't really know much about them, except for they're like the Jawas of the Avatar world. He constantly feels the desire to leave his tribe and venture off into the world to see what the world has to offer, other than sand scavenging and the occasional act of thievery. Because everyone hates sand because it's rough and it gets everywhere. But these are acts of thievery that he resents, but he understands that they are necessary for the survival of his people. The sandbenders he lives with are old-fashioned, they still utilize sand sailors as their main mode of transportation, and Hu Shen is the fastest sand sailor in all the desert. His friend Sembo, who we'll talk about in a little bit, is constantly testing him through friendly competition. His relationship with his father is not the greatest. They constantly fight about Hu Shen wanting to venture off into the desert, sort of to act as mini adventures for him to kind of quench that thirst a little bit, if you will. When he learns just who he is exactly, he's very eager to leave, to sort of chase his destiny, and he uses this as final motivation to finally just run away from his tribe. Sembo is Hu Shen's best friend. Sembo is an orphan amongst the sandbenders. No one really knows where he came from or who his parents are. One day when Hu Shen was just a child, he and his father were out on a scavenging mission when they happened upon a wreck in the desert. Amongst the wreck lie 2 dead Earth Kingdom citizens and a child a little younger than Hu Shen. The child suffered from a leg injury that would have stunted the growth of his leg, thus making him crippled for the rest of his life. Hu Shen begged his father to bring him to the village, but his father was hesitant since outsiders are not always welcome. Eventually he gave in, and the child was rescued and brought back to the village. The child grew up to be Sembo, an outcast amongst thieves, but Hu Shen's best friend nonetheless. Hu Shen was taught earthbending by his father. Hu Shen would teach Sembo what he had learned that day when his father had went to bed. Sembo was really only good at sand sailing since he doesn't need 2 legs to do that. So he and Hu Shen would race each other regularly. Although Hu Shen has shown him nothing but kindness his whole life, he still can't help but feel some level of envy towards Hu Shen. Jian Hu is Hu Shen's father and chief of the sandbending tribe. He is notorious for his hard-headedness, lack of compassion, being uncompromisable, and for being an extreme hard-ass. One might even think that he served in an army of some kind. He is very protective of his people, especially his son, even if he doesn't seem to like it. Jianhu is a very experienced fighter and is very aware of the dangers of the outside world, and he is especially aware of the negative discrepancies against his people. Almost no one in the village knows of his background, and if you were to ask him, he'd pretty much just throw you on your feet. He won't even tell his one and only son who his mother is, and he will do everything in his power to keep Hu Shen safe. One thing about this character design that I really wanted to emphasize was that sandbenders are scavengers. I wanted that to be shown in their garb. So you can see part of his shoulder pauldron and his belt are scavenged Fire Nation helmets. Just a cool little detail that we thought of. Now every Avatar series needs some kind of ragtag group of misfits, and that's where the circus gang comes from. Anik is a charismatic trickster who is also a natural born leader. He is the oldest of the circus group, along with being the mastermind behind all the heists and the jobs they pull off. Anik lacks a moral compass when it comes to the well-being of others, with the exception of his friends that he was in the circus with. He is especially protective towards Kizu, who he sees as a sort of little sister. He initially joined the circus with dreams of becoming one of the world's biggest stars. He learned that this would take way longer than he had patience for. He is the epitome of everyone wants to be famous, but no one wants to do the work. After running away, he learned that he could get his desired fortune much faster simply by taking it from other people. One little detail about his design that I really like is that we have these sort of like shoulder holster canteens for his water. Sort of like what you would see FBI agents wearing in like old 80s and 90s movies. So he could just like whoopsh, whoopsh with the water, you know, that was the idea. Loa is the comedic relief character of the cast and usually acts as the descriptions for the jobs that they are trying to pull off. And what Anik lacks in morality, Loa makes up for that. He hates confrontation and always tries to lighten the mood when things get a little too tense for the group. He acts as Anik's right-hand man when it comes to a lot of things. Loa possesses several unique airbending abilities that he developed in his circus career. He can bend the air around him with his various instruments so he can literally be a one-man band, while still being able to sing or tell jokes throughout his performance. He's also able to bend the air in his lungs and mouth to come out at any frequency. It was at this point that I realized I was just describing what singing is. Partnered this with his ability to control his vocal cords, he can perfectly emulate the voice or sound of any person or thing. Again, I'm just describing what impressions are. He does impressions. He originally joined the circus because he thought that entertaining people and making people laugh is the only thing that he will ever be good at, and the circus was perfect for that. But now he makes sure that Anik can only steal from people who can afford to be stolen from, sort of like a Robin Hood type mindset. He thinks that stealing from people with the same circumstances as them would be hypocritical of them. He's sort of like if Will Sasso was an airbender. Every Avatar cast needs a non-bending friend, and that's where Riggs comes in. Riggs is the only non-bender in the group. What Riggs lacks in bending, he makes up with his technical and mechanical prowess. He's the eye in the sky on the jobs. He is the one that looks at a property and tries to find its best in and out points so that Anik can forge a plan. He's also the guy that makes any contraptions that they might need for the job, or the circus performance. That's where he got these skills from. Riggs was born to an impoverished and abusive family, but he had his gifts for mechanical prowess since he was a child. His family could not afford to send him to a school to further his mechanical education. His parents couldn't even afford bread. So one day in the final act of greed and desperation, his parents just straight up sold him to the circus. Why did I have kids being sold in a children's series? I don't know. I would probably change that today. But there he could practice his mechanical skills with the circus rigs. Since he was very good at rigging circus contraptions, he developed a nickname Riggs, and it's stuck ever since. Riggs doesn't care about the fortune they're getting from stealing from others. He's just happy to have finally found a family that looks after each other. Now, Kizu. Don't let her small size fool you. Kizu's infamous reputation makes her one of the most dangerous benders in the world. Before the circus came to an abrupt end, she was the reason people traveled across the world to see the circus, but it wasn't without a cost to her own mind and body. Kizu's father ran the circus that the runaways worked in. He was a greedy firebending taskmaster who took advantage of anyone and everything he could if it meant making a little bit more money. When Kizu was at an extremely young age, she already showed great promise with her firebending abilities. One day, her mother mysteriously died. I don't know what that means. Kizu couldn't get control of her own emotions, and a violent explosion bursted from the center of her forehead. It was at this time Kizu and her father discovered that she had the rare power of combustion bending. Kizu's father's eyes lit up with gold thinking of all the money he could make by exploiting his daughter's newfound gift. The father would force Kizu to practice and perform spectacular stunts of explosions, but the spectacle wasn't enough. She needed to look the part also. So her father painfully tattooed a decorative yet intimidating third eye in the middle of the young girl's father. It was at this point that I realized that I said father instead of forehead, and I thought that was really funny also, so I kept it in, which is traditional against combustion benders. Day after day, her father would force Kizu to become more and more powerful in acts of training that would leave Kizu broken mentally and physically. One day, a performance was particularly stressful and Kizu could not handle the stress anymore, so she lost control and basically erupted literally. The biggest explosion she ever conjured erupted from her third eye. This resulted in the destruction of the circus, the death of her torturous father, and several circus goers, and ever since they have been on the run. The idea is that combustion bending is an unstable form of bending, and the more emotionally unstable the bender is, the more volatile it is. Kizu wears a bandana around her forehead to hide her tattoo, and a conical hat that keeps most of her face in shadow, because she's basically a world famous circus performer, but now she's also a fugitive, and she's very easily identified, so she has to hide her features. But she's also hiding her shame, because she blames herself for her and the gang always being on the run. She also tries to avoid doing any firebending of any kind unless in a life-threatening situation. Why does she have a dog? I don't know. I don't remember. I don't think that was my idea, but hey, I like dogs, so I'm not going to say no. Now, every Avatar series also has a sort of Uncle Iroh character, and that's where Yi Guan comes into play. Yi Guan is a very unique member of the White Lotus. If we were to ask her fellow White Lotus members about her, they would say that she has a glow to her that no one can explain. This is because she is a spirit who has taken control of a human's body. Because of this, some of her spirit's physical forms are prominent over the human figure, so she constantly has this White Lotus headpiece on in order to hide these features. She is a bit of a zealot amongst the White Lotus in terms of their duty to the Avatar, and Yi Guan is present at the time when Hu Shen learns that he is the Avatar. She views the Avatar as someone greater than all people and humbly works towards making sure that the Avatar can be the most powerful Avatar yet. Occasionally, she is known to go against the White Lotus orders and sometimes goes about matters in her own way. She's sort of like if Qui-Gon Jinn was a member of the White Lotus in a way. Now, when I was trying to think of an original idea for a villain, I wanted to come up with something that no other season in this series has done as a villain. And what I came up with was an evil scientist. So I came up with Dr. Akuno. Dr. Akuno is a philanthropist to most, but to a select unlucky, he's the epitome of an evil scientist. As a child, he grew up being told stories of the Avatar from his wealthy parents. He loved these stories, and like most kids, he developed a kind of obsession with these stories. Sort of like how kids these days love Superman or Spider-Man. He envied the Avatar and wanted to be just like them when he grew up. Unfortunately, his family had no bending abilities, only money. One day, little Akuno and his parents went on vacation to their private beach home. A house fire broke out, and no one was around to save them. Little Akuno was able to crawl through a gap in the wall, but his parents were left in the house and died in the fire. Akuno blamed himself, claiming that if he possessed the powers to control the fire, or to control the water from the beach, he could have saved his parents. And so from that day forward, he promised himself that he would someday be able to bend the elements. So Dr. Akuno went on to study the next best thing when it came to the elements: science. He had inherited enough money that he could send himself to the best schools in the world so that he could learn everything he could about science, particularly the new field of genetics. After he finished school, he had everything he could want: money, knowledge, fame, but he still felt empty inside. There was a hole in his heart that could only be filled with the ability of bending. It was because of this that he started using his knowledge for what most would call unethical experiments. Dr. Akuno used his endless funds and scientific prowess to kidnap benders and non-benders alike. He knew that the ability of bending was passed down genetically, so he figured he could find the bending genes in the benders and put them in the genetic code of non-benders and see if he could scientifically create benders. The failed results of his experiments would either result in death of the patients or in extreme grotesque deformities. But this won't stop him. He will do everything he can in order to achieve his ultimate goal of making himself an Avatar. So that's the cast of characters I came up with for this series. And here's the TLDR of the story. Hu Shen finds out that he's the Avatar through Yi Guan, and wants to leave and go to the city to chase his destiny. But Daddy won't let him, so he and Simba run away to the city. When this happens, it would cut to the circus gang doing a heist, because that's how you'll be introduced to their characters, each of them doing their special ability during certain stages of the heist, because who doesn't like a good heist montage? After that job is done, the circus gang and the Sandy boys would run into each other. They're all on the run now because the circus gang just committed a massive crime, and the Sandbenders are being blamed too because they're being racially profiled. But Simba is the only one that gets caught because he's crippled and there's no way for him to sandbend his way out of there. Eventually, the idea was to have each of the circus guys be Hu Shen's bending teachers. So, the newly formed gang comes up with a plan to rescue Simba. While they're doing this, Simba was sitting in a jail cell. Along comes Akuna, who sympathizes with Simba's sense of powerlessness. So he offers him a chance to become stronger. So he takes Simba into his lab and makes him a test subject. One thing leads to another, and the gang comes to rescue Simba. But by the time they get there, Akuna's experiments have already gone crazy, and Simba is now this big hulking monster that bends glass. Yeah, I came up with glass bending for this. A big fight breaks out, some people die, yada yada yada. That's what I came up with. So in conclusion, that's the story that I came up with that got me a college degree. I didn't get very far with it after I graduated. I did start a Patreon for it years ago, and that Patreon had a total number of 1 member for its entirety, and that member was no other than my college roommate turned Smash Bros rival, Robe Knack. If there's any showrunners out there at like Netflix or whoever looking for spin-off series, or if Dark Horse is looking for spin-off series for their comics, hit me up because I'm cheap. In the meantime, thank you and take care.